In July 2011, a 16-year-old girl left her home in La Paz, Mendoza province in Argentina, but she never came back. What started as a missing person report quickly turned into a mess of contradictions, silence, and evidence that nobody paid attention to. Aldana Celeste Orozco Maturano was born in 1997 in La Paz. She grew up without having a lot of money. She was raised mostly by her mom and stepdad. By 2011, Aldana was in her second year of high school and had started to develop her own opinions and dreams. Like a lot of teenagers, she was curious about the world outside her small town. She said she wanted independence and talked about finding a way to build a better future for herself and her family. Her teachers saw her as a thoughtful student who worked hard and almost never got into trouble. On July 8th, Aldana was last seen leaving her home, supposedly to visit a friend. It was a normal afternoon and nothing seemed weird or unusual. However, Aldana never came back home. As hours turned into days, her family got more and more worried, and what started as a little bit of concern soon turned into total panic. When all their attempts to find her didn't work, they decided to file a missing person report with the local police. The first investigation didn't give them much clarity or answers. The statements given to the police were inconsistent and confusing. Aldana's stepfather told the officers that she had been acting rebellious and suggested that she might have left on her own. His story made it seem like she had run away looking for freedom or independence, but this explanation didn't match up with what other people knew about her. Aldana's friends and classmates completely rejected the runaway theory. They insisted that she didn't have a boyfriend, didn't have any savings, and had no plans to leave home. She hadn't shown any signs of being upset and had even made plans for school activities later that week. To them, it was impossible to believe that she would disappear without telling anyone. These contradictions made the mystery surrounding her disappearance even deeper, but the investigators seemed reluctant to look deeper into it. Within weeks, the case lost steam and stopped moving forward. The police treated Aldana's disappearance as a runaway incident rather than a possible kidnapping, which limited the resources and urgency put into finding her. No search teams were organized and no public alerts were sent out. For the family, this lack of action was devastating as every day that passed made hope feel more and more distant. In the months that followed, the neighbors started remembering troubling details from before Aldana went missing. Several said they heard loud arguments and shouting coming from her home in the weeks before she disappeared. Some witnesses also claimed that they had seen unknown men visiting the house at odd hours, raising suspicions about possible connections to human trafficking or criminal activity. Despite these disturbing accounts, the authorities failed to follow up on important leads. Testimonies were overlooked, and evidence was never properly looked at. As a result, Aldana's case gradually faded from public attention. What started as a missing person investigation soon turned into a cold case, leaving behind questions that nobody could answer. Over the years, her face appeared on missing children campaigns and Interpol databases, keeping her name alive long after the local authorities had closed the file. Activists and independent organizations often talked about her case as a symbol of the failures in Argentina's handling of missing person investigations, especially those involving minors from low-income families. For nearly a decade, her family lived between faint hope and painful uncertainty, never knowing whether Aldana was alive or dead. In December 2020, the long-dormant case suddenly came back when the National Gendarmerie conducted a raid on the home of Aldana's mother and stepfather. The operation led to both of them being arrested and held on suspicion of involvement in human trafficking. The investigators said that Aldana's disappearance might have been connected to a bigger criminal network that worked by recruiting or forcing minors through family members. Following the arrests, the federal court expanded its investigation into a suspected child trafficking network that allegedly involved the exchange or sale of minors. The authorities started uncovering evidence suggesting that vulnerable families had been targeted by traffickers who promised money, favors, or opportunities in return for handing over children. These revelations painted a really grim picture of systematic exploitation that had stayed hidden in plain sight for years. Then in 2021, nearly 10 years after she first vanished, Aldana was found alive in Buenos Aires during a police operation against a human trafficking ring. Aldana had been forced into prostitution from a young age and lived under the constant control of her captors. Her years in captivity were marked by abuse, being forced to do things, and the loss of freedom she had once dreamed of having. Her recovery brought renewed national attention and forced Argentina to confront deep-rooted issues within its justice system. Journalists, activists, and citizens started questioning how such a case could have gone unnoticed for so long and why early warnings had been dismissed. The public outcry demanded accountability for the neglect and corruption that had allowed Aldana's suffering to continue unchecked. In July 1981, a 24-year-old woman went missing in Birmingham, England. With limited forensic tools at the time, the case went cold until a breakthrough came decades later. Nova Welsh was born in Jamaica in 1957. When Nova turned 10, her mother, Lorna, made the difficult decision to move to the United Kingdom with her 2 daughters. Lorna wanted to give her girls a better life and more opportunities, even though it meant leaving behind the familiarity and comfort of their home in Jamaica. At the age of 16, Nova met Osmond Bell, a young man who quickly captured her heart. Their connection was immediate, and despite being young, they decided to take their relationship seriously. They made the bold choice to live together. Their love seemed strong in the beginning, and 2 years later, they had their first child, Jonathan. 4 years after Jonathan's birth, they had another son whom they named Lee. The family seemed happy to people on the outside, and Nova took great pride in being a mother. However, beneath the surface, their relationship started to fall apart. The affection and connection they once shared slowly faded away, replaced by tension and resentment. Arguments became more frequent, and soon domestic violence entered their home. Osmond reportedly began physically abusing Nova, controlling her movements and threatening to kill her if she ever tried to leave. The atmosphere in the house became increasingly volatile, leaving Nova emotionally drained and fearful for her safety. Unable to carry the burden alone, Nova confided in her younger sister, sharing the pain and fear she went through. She told her how unhappy she had become and how much she longed for peace. Eventually, Nova decided she could no longer live under such circumstances. She ended her relationship with Osmond, determined to find happiness again. After some time, Nova met a man named Wayne Newby. Hoping to start fresh, she allowed herself to fall in love again. Wayne began visiting her home, and their relationship grew into something that gave her hope. But this new chapter in her life made Osmond deeply angry. His jealousy and violent behavior got worse, and Nova found herself once again surrounded by danger, unaware that an even darker fate was waiting for her. On July 27, 1981, Nova failed to show up for work. Days went by, but there was no sign of her anywhere. Her disappearance was sudden and without explanation. It was Nova's best friend who first noticed something was wrong. She called Nova several times, hoping to hear her familiar voice, but every call went unanswered. Getting uneasy, she decided to go to Nova's apartment to check on her personally. When she arrived at the apartment, she found the door locked. She knocked several times, calling out Nova's name, but there was no response. The silence inside was unsettling. At first, she thought perhaps Nova had traveled abroad without telling anyone, but something didn't add up. Hanging on the clothesline outside were freshly washed clothes, an odd detail that made her realize something was terribly wrong. On August 9th, unable to shake her worry, she went to the police station and officially reported Nova missing. 2 weeks after Nova's disappearance, the police began a formal search. They reached out to Osmond Bell, hoping he could give them information about where she was. Osmond claimed that he had not seen Nova in days and suggested that she might have left for America with her new boyfriend, Wayne. Meanwhile, Nova's 2 sons were staying with him, unaware of the tragedy that was unfolding. Then 3 days after the missing person report was filed, a strange letter showed up. It was given to Nova's best friend, who quickly turned it over to the police. The handwriting appeared to belong to a woman, but they didn't know who the writer was. On August 18th, a neighbor called the police to report a strong foul smell that had begun spreading through the area. The smell seemed to be coming from Nova's apartment upstairs. Responding officers broke the lock and entered the home to investigate. The stench was overpowering, leading them to a cupboard located under the stairs. The door to the cupboard was locked, but the lock appeared to have been messed with. A piece of chewing gum was oddly used to keep it sealed. When the officers finally opened the cupboard, they were met with a horrifying sight. Inside was the decomposing body of a woman wrapped in a blanket. The body was soon identified as belonging to Nova. She was wearing a nightgown, and despite the state of decay, her features were still recognizable. The scene was heartbreaking and disturbing. The police immediately called for an ambulance, and Nova's body was taken for an autopsy. According to the postmortem report, she had died from pressure applied to her neck, indicating that she had been strangled. The piece of chewing gum from the cupboard lock was carefully collected as evidence. While the world searched for Nova, she had been lying dead inside her own home. Osmond became the main suspect. He was arrested and held in custody for 4 days, during which he was questioned over and over about Nova's death. Osmond maintained his innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with it. With no solid evidence linking him directly to the case, the police were forced to let him go. The investigation continued for some time, but with no new leads or breakthroughs, the case eventually went cold. In 2016, cold case investigators started reviewing older unsolved cases, hoping that advances in forensic science might finally bring long-awaited answers. Among these cases was the tragic case of Nova, whose death had remained a haunting mystery for more than 3 decades. By this time, genetic testing had advanced significantly since the 1980s, offering new possibilities for uncovering evidence that had once seemed useless. The investigators looked again at the materials collected from the original crime scene, determined to find something that could point to the person who did it. During their review, the investigators made a crucial discovery. DNA testing on the piece of chewing gum used to seal the cupboard door where Nova's body was found revealed a match to Osmond Bell. The same DNA profile was also identified on the anonymous letter that had been sent to Nova's best friend, an attempt to shift suspicion toward Wayne, the man Nova had recently begun dating. The DNA evidence was described as having a 1,000,000,000 chance of belonging to anyone else, leaving no doubt about the connection. Following the discovery, Bell was arrested in 2016 and charged in connection with Nova's death. After years of waiting, the case finally went to trial at Birmingham Crown Court in 2017. The court heard that Bell had killed Nova in a fit of rage after learning about her new relationship. The prosecutors explained that after the crime, he had tried to mislead the investigators by sending a fake letter pretending to be someone else and suggesting that Wayne was responsible. The details painted a picture of a jealous and violent man desperate to hide his guilt. Testimony during the trial revealed that Nova and Bell had continued living together even after their separation, but their relationship had become deeply toxic. Witnesses told the court how Bell had repeatedly threatened to kill Nova if she ever left him. This threat, once dismissed as an angry outburst, took on a chilling weight as the evidence unfolded. Despite the prosecution's efforts, the jury found Bell guilty of manslaughter, concluding that he had not planned the crime but acted in anger. In March 2017, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. After 36 long years, justice had finally been served. Nova's mother, Lorna, expressed a deep sense of relief and sorrow as she gave her statement to the press. She said, "Finally, after 36 long years, Nova can rest in peace. The family can now have closure knowing the person who took Nova's life has been brought to justice. I would sincerely like to thank everyone involved in bringing this case to court." A police officer who had worked on the case also reflected on its significance. He stated, "With the advances in technology helping our old investigations, we can bring people to justice no matter how long after the offense has happened." In August 1660, a 70-year-old man set out on a short walk in Campden, England, and never returned. With no body and mounting suspicion, the disappearance spiraled into one of the most shocking criminal cases of the 17th century. William Harrison was born around the year 1590. As an adult, William went into service under Lady Campden, where he worked as a steward and estate manager. This position placed him in charge of overseeing the smooth running of her lands and financial affairs, a role that demanded both precision and honesty. Within the community, William was known as a man of strong moral standing. His work often required him to travel, collect rents, and help settle disputes between tenants, tasks that could easily lead to mistrust or resentment if handled poorly. By the year 1660, William was nearing 70 years old, an age when most people would have retired from demanding jobs. Nevertheless, he continued to do his job with the same hard work he had shown throughout his life. He lived in Campden with his wife and son, surrounded by the quiet rhythms of village life. On August 16, 1660, William set out on foot to collect rents in the nearby village of Charingworth, a journey of about 2 miles from his home. It was a routine task, one he had done many times before without any problems. However, that evening, William failed to return home. His wife, getting more and more anxious as darkness fell, sent the family servant, John Perry, to look for him along the familiar path. When John did not return by the following morning, William's son, Edward, joined the search. Determined to find out what had happened to his father, their search led to a disturbing discovery. Along the route to Charingworth, they found a hat, a shirt, and a neckband belonging to William. The clothes were stained with blood, and the hat appeared to have been slashed with a sharp object. To those who knew William's habits and cautious nature, it seemed clear that something terrible had happened. With no sign of his body and only these bloody items, the community feared the worst. Rumors spread quickly through Campden that William had been killed during his journey. Suspicion soon turned toward John Perry, the servant who had been sent to find his master. Under questioning, John offered a shocking confession. He claimed that he, his mother Joan Perry, and his brother Richard had conspired to rob and kill William. According to his story, they had strangled the elderly steward and dumped his body in a mill pond to hide their crime. Despite there being no body, the confession seemed convincing enough to the local authorities, and all 3 members of the Perry family were arrested and charged. The first trial took place in 1661. During the proceedings, inconsistencies came up in John's statements, including a false story he had told weeks earlier about being attacked by robbers. His testimony implicated his mother and brother, leading to their conviction for robbery, though no solid evidence of murder was presented. It is believed that Joan and Richard pleaded guilty to robbery in hopes of benefiting from the Indemnity and Oblivion Act of 1660, which pardoned certain first-time offenders. Still, questions about the missing body and the truth of John's account remained. A second trial was held later that spring, this time charging the Perrys with killing William. By then, John had taken back his earlier confession, claiming that his words were the result of confusion or insanity. Nevertheless, the jury remained unconvinced. Despite there being no physical proof in John's reversal, all three were found guilty and received the death penalty. The verdict was met with both disbelief and grim acceptance among the townspeople. The executions were carried out on Broadway Hill in Gloucester. Joan Perry was hanged first, reportedly in an attempt to break any supposed witchcraft spell she might have cast over her sons. Her execution was followed by that of Richard and John, who both said they were innocent until the end. 2 years after his mysterious disappearance in 1662, William shocked everyone by returning to England alive. He was older, frail, and marked by the hardships he had gone through, yet unmistakably the same William who had vanished on his journey to Charingworth. According to William's own story, he had been kidnapped on the night of his disappearance by 3 horsemen. They had grabbed him on the road and carried him off against his will, taking him first to the coastal town of Deal. There he claimed he was sold to a ship's captain and taken overseas. His story became even more extraordinary as he described being sold into slavery in the Ottoman Empire. Forced into servitude, he lived under harsh conditions until the death of his master gave him a chance to escape. After his escape, William said he made his way to a seaport where he managed to hide away on a Portuguese ship. The ship carried him to Lisbon, where he found temporary safety before finally getting passage back to England. His return journey was long and dangerous, and it was only after many months that he was able to reach his homeland once more. When he arrived, he was welcomed by shocked neighbors and a deeply shaken family who had mourned him. The revelation that William was alive cast a grim light on the events that had followed his disappearance. The executions of Joan, John, and Richard Perry appeared to be a terrible miscarriage of justice. They had been tried, convicted, and hanged for a crime that had never happened, their deaths resting entirely on John's false confession. The case became one of the most disturbing examples of wrongful conviction in English legal history, raising troubling questions about how reliable confessions made under pressure really are. In May 1987 in Hopkins, South Carolina, 2 hunters stumbled upon a horrifying scene of human remains. With limited forensic tools available at the time, the case quickly went cold, leaving her family without answers until decades later. Patricia Ann Green was born in 1953. She grew up to become a devoted mother who dedicated much of her time and energy to raising her 3 children. By 1987, Patricia was raising her family in Columbia, South Carolina. At that time, she lived with her 3 children and her sister in an apartment located on Rice Street, just off Pickens Street. On May 10, 1987, a shocking discovery was made just steps away from the entrance of McEntire Air Base in Hopkins, South Carolina. 2 hunters moving through the area came across a disturbing sight, and what they found would stay with them forever. In their horror, they quickly contacted law enforcement to report what they had seen. When the police arrived at the scene, they confirmed the hunters' worst fears. The victim was a woman who was already dead. The officers carefully looked around the area and determined that the woman had been shot multiple times before being left in a culvert. The investigators began piecing together what they could from the scene. They worked to understand how the victim ended up in such a remote and hidden location. While searching the immediate area, the officers noted a small but haunting detail. The woman's shoes were not on her feet. Instead, her untied shoes were found lying nearby on the bank of the ditch, separated from her body. One of the first challenges the authorities were facing was identifying the victim. No identification was found at the scene. With no personal belongings or immediate clues at the crime scene, the investigators decided to share details of the case locally in the hope that someone might recognize her. Eventually, family members came forward and confirmed the victim was Patricia Ann Green. Years passed without justice, but in the 2000s and 2010s, a new effort came about. Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott established a cold case squad dedicated to looking at unsolved cases again. This specialized team began reviewing old cases with fresh eyes, determined to apply modern technology to evidence that had once given no results. Patricia's case was among those re-examined. The detectives went back to the evidence collected from the crime scene decades earlier. With advances in technology, samples were tested again. The new analysis gave investigators a crucial breakthrough. The DNA results pointed directly to Philip Johnson, a man already serving multiple life sentences in Sumter County. Johnson had been arrested in 1988 and was known for a string of violent crimes. In March 2017, when the investigators confronted him, he offered details about the crime that only the person who did it could have known. According to his own story, Johnson admitted that Patricia's killing was part of a spree. He told the investigators there was no specific motive, describing her as simply somebody that he shot and killed. The authorities believe that he killed 2 women in Sumter County before he killed Patricia, and then went on to take the lives of 2 more women afterward. Johnson remains incarcerated at Kirkland Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. Reflecting on the case, law enforcement emphasized the importance of not giving up. The authorities stated that this case serves as a reminder to victims' families that they are never forgotten. Cold case investigators promised that no matter how much time passes, they will continue to review old files with the latest technology available. For Patricia's family, the wait for answers stretched nearly 30 years. But with a confession and DNA confirmation, they finally received the truth about what happened to her.